we being too mean to the poor Greeks? That's something some of the German newspapers, even quite right-wing ones, are starting to ask today. Der Spiegel, for example, not terribly right-wing, but certainly supports economic orthodoxy, if you like, and has been saying for months that Greece does need to get its budgets under control. Today they say that Europe no longer has any faith that the measures being put into place in Greece can help the situation in any way. No one believes in them anymore, not even the economists who designed them, because in order to help boost Greece's economy, you've got to create some growth from somewhere. And if people are living on €586 of minimum wage a month, as we saw in the French papers earlier, they're not going to buy anything, are they? So you just can't create any growth. You can't create anything financially, and they say that Angela Merkel is careering blindly off down the wrong path just because that's the way that economic orthodoxy would have pointed her. It's time now, they say, and they're not the only ones in the German press, to stop, to change direction and realise that this just is not working. Greece's public debt is higher now. It's now 160% of GDP, whereas when the IMF originally took over in 2009, when they got their first bailout, it was 120%. So the situation is just getting worse and worse. Now, they are critical of Angela Merkel, but not quite as much as The Independent. Look at their cartoon. They've kind of used the Goya classic painting of Saturn eating his baby, and they have Angela Merkel eating a Greek baby. Classical allusion there, rather eruditely, in The Independent's cartoon, which is a pretty strong, violent image. Now, in the paper, they say they're talking about the chance of violent social unrest in Greece, saying that people just will not go on with whole families living on one grandparent's pension, or people being unable to afford to feed themselves and their children every day of the week. The only way that this can end is with some kind of violent disturbance. We've seen riots already, but we could see much worse.
Desperate stuff, isn't it? Now, we've also had those bomb attacks, of course, on Israeli embassies in Georgia and India yesterday, blamed on Iran. What's the press reaction been, though?
Well, The Guardian says that whether this was Iran or not, it could still be the spark that sets the tinderbox of the Middle East off into a massive conflagration. Of course, that's because the tone has been raised so much between Israel and Iran already. But in recent months, Iran wants revenge. They say they're fairly convinced that it was Iran behind these car bombs because it wants revenge for what they say is a series of killings where its nuclear scientists have been being picked off by the Israeli intelligence services, according to Iran at least. And they reckon that this could be the moment that leads Benjamin Netanyahu to press the trigger, if you like, and launch a preemptive strike on Iran. They say he wants to do that before the American election in November, because at the moment, in a difficult electoral context, Barack Obama isn't going to come out and say anything against Israel's more warlike tendencies. He needs to keep that Jewish lobby on board. But if he wins a big victory in November, which the paper reckons is still quite probable, then he might feel that he can not be forced to take such a pro-Israel line. So Netanyahu reckons that's his deadline. The paper says there's a 50% chance he will launch that kind of strike by April. But the Israeli paper Haaretz takes a rather different point of view. They say if this was Iran behind those two bombings, then they were quite pathetic, really, as they put it. If this is the best that Iran can come up with, then it shows that their military capabilities are very limited, and Israel has less to fear than it thinks. So maybe this actually will calm the more hawkish types in Netanyahu's cabinet, they think.
Now, you mentioned Barack Obama. One man meeting him is the Chinese vice president. This is Xi Jinping, assumed to be next in line as the next leader of China. The paper's shedding much light on him?
Well, we don't know much about him, do we? But Foreign Policy magazine has got a good profile of Xi Jinping today. They say he's a scion of one of the founding families of revolutionary communist China. But after his father fell foul of Mao in the 60s, he had to spend several years on a work camp being re-educated, apparently on a farm in the country where he had to muck out pigs. And they reckon that gave him a populist slant, which enables him to appeal to China's poorest now. Of course, he's a man of the system, as you would have to be to rise that high. But they reckon he's less ideological and more pragmatic than Hu Jintao, the man we assume is going to succeed in October when the Chinese Communist Party conference. And they say that might make him a better partner for Washington. But he is also on record as having railed against foreigners with full bellies who point their fingers at China. So he might not necessarily be any more friendly.
Quick story about newspapers behaving badly themselves.
Yeah, or indeed defending their own bad behaviour in quite strong terms. This is in Britain, of course, where 5 journalists, very senior journalists on The Sun, were arrested at the weekend in an investigation into police corruption, essentially, whether they bribed policemen in exchange for information. Now, The Guardian says on their front page, the headline is Murdoch hit by feud. Now, what they mean is that the papers, Murdoch papers, have come out railing in editorials against the company's management, saying it was News Corporation that gave the police information that led to those arrests, and essentially accusing Rupert Murdoch of throwing his own journalists into the hot water so that in order to try and deflect attention away from him. That's after a very strongly worded editorial in The Sun, which said that after this witch hunt, as the editor put it, Britain's press freedom standards are worse than some ex-Soviet states, which might be taking it a little far.
Elena, thanks very much. That's Elena with her look through the international newspapers there here on France 24. Headlines then, and Moody's has cut the economic outlook